Hi, my name's Justine Shelton, and I have several trainings under my belt, but my primary practice is the training at the 500-hour level with the American Viniyoga Institute under the direction of Gary Krafsow. Viniyoga is a very therapeutic style of yoga, which is why I'm drawn to it. I have found it very beneficial in my body in helping to heal my injuries, but also in my clients. As a yoga teacher, you can often tell if people have tight hips just by looking at them, maybe watching their gait, or even watching how they stand. Not everyone is built the same, so this idea that everyone can do a pose if they practice long enough is not true. Everyone's body is different. Sometimes people have tight hips due to tight muscles, maybe from activities. Maybe they're runners, horseback riders, something that uses a lot of strength in the hips. However, sometimes people can't get into yoga postures because of the structure of their bones, and that's not going to change unless we break the bones, which we try to avoid in yoga. So keep that in mind. The angle of the femur head is going to be different in different people. The rotation of the femur. Sometimes people, like you might notice women often, I'm a good example, have wider hips, the knees come in, so there's that pressure coming in. Some women, we're born with wider hips so that we can give birth. But that can oftentimes make to where our knees might be a little knock-kneed. That can put pressure on the knees. So we're all different. Some of us might have an angle in our femur that we have a bit of an external rotation. And you can tell a lot about your hips. Just stand naturally. Are your toes pointing out? Are you a bit pigeon-toed? Are you knock-kneed? This is all going to inform you about your own structure. So keep in mind it's not one size fits all. So we adapt the poses for reasons. The poses are here to serve you. You're not here to serve the poses. So keep in mind we can change the pose in whichever way we need so that your body is served to the best ability. So the hips are the largest joint in the body, and they are a true ball and socket joint. So with that we get a lot of stability. What we trade for that is mobility. So you want to keep the hips open if you can. And the idea of energy moving through the body with the prana moving, it can get caught in the tight parts of our body. So the hips can hold a lot in the body. So when you're doing deep hip opening work, it's important to drink a lot of water so that you can flush toxins out. And all of the body is interconnected. So if you're having knee pain, it could very well be because your hips are very tight. And the hips can be tight in the back or in the front. I had severe knee pain in the front of my knees and was told it's because I have tight hips. Well, my hips are very open in the back, very tight in the front. So what was happening, the hip flexors were pulling up on the quadriceps were pulling up, everything's pulling up, and the knee has no muscle in it. So that's just tendons and ligaments being pulled. If you're getting pain in the knee itself, you're just doing damage. So really opening the hip flexors will allow the knees to be healthier. And the other thing to help with the knees is keeping the ankles strong. So as far as the hips, keeping them open, keeping the muscles with circulation moving through them, and keeping the actual socket of the hip healthy by releasing the synovial fluid. With a joint, any movement is good. So getting movement into the joints, doing big circles with the knee so that the hip gets that rotation, releasing the synovial fluid. It's like oiling the Tin Man. I like to use the idea of circulation in the body. And the whole reason we do yoga is to keep the stagnation away, keeping the circulation moving. And I'll often tell my clients the idea of a pond. If you have a pond that's out in the sun, there's no wind, no water running through it, that pond's going to get stagnant. It might have algae growing on top. You're not going to want to swim in it. But if you have a pond that is in the shade and it gets a little bit of wind keeping it moving and there's a rivulet flowing through it, that circulation is going to keep the pond healthy. And it's the same idea in our bodies. If we're not getting movement through the spine, through the hips, all the joints, in the muscles, then you start to stagnate. Once you get that stagnation, then the body starts to get accumulation, and that's when disease will start. So yoga just keeps all the energy channels in the body moving and flowing freely. It might sound counterintuitive to only work to the level of the weakest side. And when I say weakest in this sense, I mean the tighter side. But what really happens if you keep creating more of an imbalance by focusing on the looser side, that's just going to get you further and further away from balance. So coming back to harmony, maybe working the tight side, then the loose side, coming back to the tight side again. So for those of you who want to hurry up a little, that might quicken bringing you back into balance. But by focusing only on the looser side and taking it deeper, over the long run, that's going to create a lot more asymmetry, and with that will come problems in the body. There are some common issues that we have, that we share in common, and some of it just comes from our lifestyle. A good portion of us sit a large majority of the day, and when you're sitting in a chair, that serves to shorten the hip flexors. We were built to be standing and running and moving, and when you're sitting 8, 10, 12 hours a day, that can start to permanently shorten the hip flexors. So a real culprit in low back pain is a tight psoas. The psoas is a muscle, it's the largest hip flexor. It attaches to the entire lumbar spine, and it runs very deep, attaching to the upper thigh. So the psoas is awoken for the first time when a baby sits up. And as that tightens, it starts to pull us so that we come down and down and down, so that you might start to see people walking where they're really coming down. And you need to keep that psoas open so that you can stand erect. The other muscle that's commonly tight in us, especially Westerners, is the piriformis. And that is a deep muscle in your hiney. It attaches to the front of the sacrum. The sacrum is like a triangle bone. It attaches to the front side of the sacrum, runs deep through your rear, and then attaches to the top of the thigh bone. That helps us externally rotate the leg when the leg is down, but then when the leg is past 90 degrees, it can help internally rotate. So it's tricky to stretch. And it is the #1 cause of sciatica, because when the piriformis gets tight, the sciatic nerve, if you're lucky, runs adjacent to the piriformis. But 60% of the population, it runs through the piriformis. So when the piriformis gets tight, it starts to pinch down on that nerve, whether it's running adjacent or through. And that creates pain because a nerve is getting compressed. The pain can be localized to your rear, or it can run all the way down the leg, even down into the toes. So it's not something that's fun to live with. And it's not always caused by a tight piriformis. That's just the most common cause. So we will do some poses today that really focus on opening that from the external rotation and the internal rotation. The sacroiliac joint, also known as the SI joint, is very important to keep strong and stabilized and plays a major factor in the low back. It is part of the low back, but it's also part of the hip and the pelvic bowl. You have the ilium, which is where iliac comes from, and that's the hip bones, this part here. It goes all the way around to the back. And then you have the sacrum, which is that triangle bone at the base of your spine. The SI joint are where the sacrum and the ilium meet, and it's a fairly large joint.
So let's go ahead and start from the anatomical connection.
Okay. So the SI joint is where the ilium, or the, yes. So the SI joint is where the ilium connects to the sacrum. If you've ever seen anyone who has dimples in their low back, that is where the SI joint is. That in yoga has become a bit of a precarious thing, because if you do extreme leverage twisting, it has been known to pop out. So that is why we say mind your edge and do not leverage. So you're using muscular strength, and if anything, you're just using a little bit of arm strength when you're twisting. If you know you have a SI issue or a spastic SI, the poses to avoid are leverage twisting. And if you do a twist, you might even want to do both knees bent so it's symmetrical, with a block between your knees so the knees stay hip width. Anytime the knee is pulled beyond hip width, going towards the other knee, That creates a tension in the SI joint. So the safest way to work with the SI is doing symmetrical forward bends rather than one leg forward, one leg back. A seated forward bend with both legs forward versus Janu Shirshasana with one leg forward, the other leg bent. But it is important, if you have that weakness in the SI, to really focus on bringing strength around the SI and doing bridging poses, and prone back bends are the best way to do that. Yoga is a very good practice preventatively to keep us from getting hip replacements as we age. If you have already had a hip replacement, it is crucial that you check with your doctor and know if it's okay for you to start a yoga practice. And really get the clarity from your doctor on how much of an external rotation is okay. You don't want to find out the hard way. So make sure you get that clarified. Now, if you have arthritis in your hips, yoga is going to help you tremendously. Getting that movement, arthritis is a stagnation, and it's when there isn't the flow of the synovial fluid in the joint. There's a compression and sometimes even a calcification where it's bone on bone. So with arthritis in the hips, pain is going to help you. Pain is going to be your teacher. If you get stabbing pain, knife-like pain, then you need to back off and not do it. Decrease your range of motion. Never push beyond where you should. Even if your range of motion is just very slight, over time it will get bigger, but you have to be patient. So let pain be your guide. Never go to where it's sharp or acute pain. Always quit if it gets to that point. And working with arthritis, keeping movement in the joints is good. So doing big circles with the knee, getting that synovial fluid loose in the joint. Now we also have the bursa sacs in the joint. And when the bursa is irritated, you get something called bursitis. That's when you need to be careful. Sometimes if you have something that's going on and on, go see your doctor, because bursitis would need to be treated a little differently. All that movement could just agitate it. So you need to rest and get it healthy before you move on. Now the body holds a lot of emotions, a lot of history. So it's very common, I like to warn people before they go into the poses. Sometimes if you're doing deep hip openers or very deep twists, that can release emotion. It might be laughing, it might be crying, it might be anger. So don't be shocked and just sit with the emotion on your mat. And the idea in yoga is the more you can be with the emotion on the mat, maybe the next time it comes up in life, it'll be easier off the mat. So be patient and be kind to yourself. And if emotion arises, just let it come in. Now keep in mind, yoga is a tool to help aid the body in its healing. The body is an amazing machine. Amazing. The more I study it, the more I realize just how well designed it is. And it has the ability to heal. So just keep that in mind. And if you don't feel like you're making progress in your practice, make progress in your mind and just hold that vision of that healthy whole you, and it will come. Go yoga!